Hey. Throwaway because, well, I think you'll understand why. I'm honestly just sitting here in a kind of numb shock, typing this out because I don't know what else to do. I need some perspective, some advice, or even just someone to tell me I'm not crazy for feeling this way. So, I'm 35, been married to my wife, let's call her Lisa, for 9 years. We met in college, did the whole young and in love thing, got married after graduation, and started building a life together. I always thought we were that strong couple, the one that'd go the distance, you know? We've been through some rough patches like anyone, but I really thought we'd get through it all. We don't have kids, just a dog and a pretty comfortable life we've built together. But then, recently, things started to feel a little off. She's always been a bit of a social butterfly, but lately it was like she had a new energy, going out more, dressing up a lot more than usual, and just, I don't know, a certain distance. And before you say it, yes, I've heard the stories, the warnings about how people change, how affairs happen. But we trust each other, or at least I thought we did. So, I ignored the pit in my stomach, telling myself I was being paranoid. At first, I just chalked it up to stress. Lisa's got a demanding job in marketing, and she'd been talking about this big project she was working on. Late nights, weekends, you name it. She'd come home exhausted, sometimes barely talking before going straight to bed. I'd tried to ask her how her day went, but her responses were short, sometimes even irritated. You wouldn't understand, she'd say with this tired look, or, I just don't want to talk about work. I tried to be supportive, to give her space. We've always been good at giving each other room to breathe, respecting each other's time. I'd cook dinner, take care of the dog, make sure the house was in order, hoping it would ease her load a bit. But even on her days off, she'd be glued to her phone. At first, I figured it was emails or texts from her team, but there were times when she'd just get this sly little smile as she looked at the screen, like she was in on some private joke. I'd ask, "What's so funny?" She'd brush it off. "Oh, just something I saw online." Or worse, she'd turn the phone over, face down, and say, "Nothing." That's when the unease started to creep in. I tried to brush off the unease. I'd tell myself, "Come on, man, you're just being insecure." But then, one night, things escalated in a way I couldn't ignore. Lisa had been out with her friends. Well, that's what she told me, anyway. She was out late, and she didn't get home until around 2 a.m., which wasn't unheard of, but still unusual for her. She came back a bit tipsy, laughing to herself as she kicked off her shoes. But then she just went straight to the bathroom, barely even acknowledging me. When she finally came to bed, she had this weird scent on her, like a different cologne. It was faint, but it was there. I lay there beside her, my mind racing, questioning everything. I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I got up, figuring I'd clear my head, maybe get a glass of water. But as I was heading back to bed, I saw her phone charging on the counter, screen lit up with a message notification. Now, I've never been one to invade her privacy. Trust has always been huge for me. But there was this gut feeling, this overwhelming need to know. Against my better judgment, I picked up the phone. The message was from someone saved as Mark W., and the preview read, "Tonight was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." I froze. My hands were shaking as I held her phone. I could feel this rush of heat and cold at the same time, this pit forming in my stomach. I thought, no, this has to be some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe it's just an old friend. But I knew that wasn't true. I mean, who texts someone like that if there's nothing going on? I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. I clicked on the message and saw the entire thread. There were dozens of texts, and they weren't work-related, not even close. They were flirtatious, intimate, full of private jokes and pet names. I scrolled through, feeling sicker with every word, and then I saw photos. Selfies of them together, sitting in a cozy booth at what looked like a bar, her head on his shoulder, smiling up at him. And then my heart sank further when I saw a message from her to him. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You made me feel alive again." I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was outside my own body, like this was some bad movie scene, and any second I'd wake up. But it was real. I was holding her phone, looking at undeniable proof that my wife was having an affair. I felt this surge of anger, like this dark wave crashing over me. But more than anger, it was a hollow, gut-wrenching sadness. This was the woman I trusted, the person I'd shared almost a decade with, and here she was, pouring out her feelings to someone else. I couldn't understand it. I thought we were solid, that we had something real. I went back to the bedroom, staring at her sleeping there, looking so peaceful, as if she hadn't just shattered my whole world. I wanted to shake her awake, to confront her right then and there, but I knew I was too furious, too hurt to get any answers. I'd just end up shouting or saying things I'd regret. So, I decided to wait until morning. I barely slept. I kept replaying those messages in my mind, seeing her smile in those photos. I'd look at the clock every hour, hoping the night would end, feeling both desperate to confront her and terrified of what she'd say. Morning came, and I hadn't closed my eyes once. I was exhausted, my head pounding, but the anger kept me awake. I waited for her to wake up, going over what I would say, wondering how she'd react, trying to prepare myself for anything. Finally, she stirred. She yawned, stretched, and looked over at me, her face soft and still half asleep. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Lisa," I said, my voice barely steady. "Who's Mark?" Her face went pale, and for a second, I thought maybe she'd try to deny it. But she didn't. She just looked away, her mouth tightening. And in that moment I knew. She didn't even try to explain it away. It's complicated," she said, barely able to meet my eyes. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice rising. "There's nothing complicated about cheating, Lisa. I saw everything, the texts, the photos. I saw you two together. Just tell me the truth." She was silent for a long time, just staring at her hands, fidgeting with her wedding ring. Then she started with some half-hearted explanation, something about how she felt neglected, how things had felt stale between us. I sat there, stunned, as she tried to make it sound like our marriage had pushed her into this, like I was somehow responsible for her betrayal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand what she was doing to me, but all I could do was sit there, feeling numb. She kept talking, spinning her story. She said that she hadn't meant for this to happen, that Mark was just someone who understood her, in a way she felt I didn't anymore. She went on about how she was going through things, and that she felt like I'd pulled away over the past year. Pulled away? I was stunned. Here I was, doing everything to support us, to be there for her. She turned it all back on me, as if her choices were somehow my fault. When I pushed her, asking if she'd slept with him, she hesitated. She gave me this pitiful look, like she thought I couldn't handle the truth, then mumbled. "It was only once, maybe twice." But I knew her too well. That hesitation, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, it told me everything. I didn't believe a word. I sat there, staring at her, feeling this heavy ache in my chest as I realized just how many lies she'd woven to cover this up, how deep her betrayal went. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. She kept trying to justify it, as if what she'd done was somehow reasonable, as if I was supposed to accept it. Her excuses felt like knives. Each word she spoke twisted that knife a little deeper. It wasn't just that she cheated, it was that she seemed so detached, so indifferent to what she'd done to me, to us. I couldn't take it anymore. "You're unbelievable," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "You're standing here, blaming me, acting like you didn't tear our life apart. Do you even care, Lisa? Do you even feel an ounce of regret?" She sighed, looking frustrated, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "I'm sorry, okay?" she said, but the words came out hollow, mechanical. "I don't know what you want me to say." That was it. That was the moment I realized she wasn't the woman I thought she was. I'd been clinging to this image of her, of us, this idea that we could work through anything. But the person in front of me was a stranger, someone who'd lied, cheated, and now couldn't even give me a real apology. I felt this overwhelming urge to leave, to get out of that house and put as much distance between us as I could. So, without another word, I turned, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I needed space, a place to think, to breathe. I needed to be away from her. I drove around for hours, just trying to process everything. My mind was spinning, replaying our argument, the things she said, the way she looked at me like I was the problem. It was surreal. This was the woman I had trusted with my whole heart, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, and she betrayed me in the most thoughtless, careless way possible. At some point, I parked by a quiet lake outside of town, just staring out at the water, feeling completely empty. The anger had burned out, leaving only this hollow ache. I kept thinking about our life together, all the memories we made. It was like I was watching them crumble, piece by piece. I thought about our wedding day, the vows we'd made, all the plans we'd shared. I'd spent so long thinking she was my forever, that nothing could come between us. And now, here I was, alone, wondering if any of it had been real. A part of me wanted to believe her, to accept her excuses and tell myself that maybe we could work through it, that maybe this was a mistake we could fix. But then, I'd remember the texts, the photos, the lies. How could I ever trust her again? The thought of going back, of trying to rebuild after this, felt impossible. I sat there until the sun started to set, feeling lost and broken, torn between the life I'd built and the reality I was now facing. Eventually, I went back home. I felt exhausted, like I'd aged years in a single day. Walking back through the front door, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Our home, which had always felt like a place of love and safety, was now tainted by her betrayal. Lisa was in the kitchen, nervously pacing, as if waiting for me. When she saw me, she tried to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain herself again, but I held up my hand. I didn't want to hear it. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said quietly, every word feeling like a weight. "Because I don't think I can keep living like this." She looked at me, wide-eyed, but still didn't say anything. I could see the panic on her face, but there was no guilt, no real remorse. Just fear of what might happen next, fear of what she might lose. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "I don't think you understand how much this hurts. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed everything we built together." She started to cry, but I wasn't moved. Her tears felt hollow, like she was more upset at the consequences than the pain she'd caused. I told her that I needed time to think, that I'd be staying with a friend for a few days. I couldn't be here, in this house, with all the memories and the lies suffocating me. As I packed a bag, I felt like I was closing a chapter of my life. I drove to my friend Mike's place. He's been my best friend since high school, the kind of friend who knows everything about you without needing to ask. When I showed up at his door, one look at my face was all it took for him to know something was seriously wrong. We sat down, and I told him everything. Every painful detail about Lisa, the texts, her reaction, the way she tried to turn it around on me. Talking about it made it feel both more real and slightly less suffocating, like I was finally letting out a breath I'd been holding since I'd found those messages. Mike listened, his face a mixture of shock and anger. When I finished, he was quiet for a minute, just shaking his head. "Man, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she could do something like that." His support was like a lifeline, helping me hold myself together when I felt like falling apart. He didn't push me to make any decisions, didn't tell me what I should or shouldn't do. He just let me vent, let me be angry, sad, and confused. And it felt like, for the first time since this all started, I wasn't alone. That night, as I lay on his couch staring up at the ceiling, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for what I'd lost, but relief that I didn't have to keep pretending everything was okay. I didn't have to play the part of the happy husband anymore. The next few days were a blur. Staying at Mike's gave me some space, but it didn't take away the pain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages, saw Lisa's face as she tried to explain it all away. It was like a loop, playing over and over in my mind, reminding me of the betrayal I couldn't escape. Lisa texted and called constantly, asking me to come home, saying she was sorry, begging me to talk. She'd send these long messages, spilling out how she missed me, how she'd made a mistake, how she didn't want to lose me. But none of it felt genuine. It was like she was going through the motions, saying what she thought I wanted to hear, trying to salvage something she'd already destroyed. At one point, I started to question everything, our whole relationship. I found myself wondering if I'd ever really known her, if there had been signs I'd ignored, if I'd been blind to something that had been there all along. How long had I been living in a lie, trusting someone who could throw it all away so easily? The realization hit hard. I was grieving the woman I thought she was, not the woman she actually turned out to be. And that hurt even more. Because now, looking back, every memory, every happy moment felt tainted, like a beautiful picture slowly burning around the edges. By the end of the week, I knew I couldn't live in limbo forever. I couldn't stay at Mike's indefinitely, couldn't keep avoiding the life I'd built just because it was painful to face. So, I decided to meet with Lisa one last time to talk, to get some closure. I needed to lay it all out, to let her know the hurt and betrayal she'd caused, and to make my decision final. When I walked back into our house, it felt different, foreign, like it wasn't mine anymore. Lisa was waiting in the living room, looking nervous, her eyes red like she'd been crying. She tried to reach out to me, to hug me, but I stepped back. I couldn't handle the thought of her touch. It felt like it would break me. "I don't think you understand what you did to me, to us," I began, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "You took everything we built, everything I trusted, and you threw it away. And now you're here saying you're sorry, but you weren't sorry when you were lying to me, sneaking around behind my back." She started crying again, saying she'd made a mistake, that it had been a moment of weakness. But the more she spoke, the emptier her words felt. She kept trying to justify, trying to explain, but none of it was enough. None of it could erase what she'd done or how she'd broken my trust. "I just don't see how we come back from this," I said finally. "I can't unsee what I saw, and I can't pretend like things can go back to the way they were. I need to move on. I need to let this go, even if it hurts." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw a genuine fear in her eyes, a fear that I was truly done. But I couldn't waver. I knew that trying to rebuild, to patch things up, would only prolong the pain. After I said those words, the room went silent. Lisa just looked at me, like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her anymore. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I was someone different now, someone hardened by the betrayal, someone who'd lost the softness I'd once had for her. There was no more fight left in me, no more pleading or questions. Just emptiness. She begged me not to leave, her voice breaking. "Please, just give me one more chance," she whispered, barely able to look at me. "I know I messed up, I know I hurt you. But we can rebuild. We can start over." But I couldn't see it. I couldn't imagine trusting her again, couldn't see myself coming back to someone who'd been able to lie so easily, so thoroughly. I'd already spent too much time questioning myself, wondering what I could have done differently. And deep down, I knew that staying would only drag me through more pain. I shook my head, swallowing hard. "I think it's time we both move on, Lisa. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine." I packed up the last few things I needed and left the house that day, leaving her standing there, tears streaming down her face. Walking out felt like ripping away a part of myself, but I knew it was the only way forward. It was a final goodbye to the life I thought I had and the future I thought we'd share. As I closed the door behind me, I felt this strange mixture of grief and relief. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but there was also a sense of freedom, a small, flickering hope that maybe, someday, I'd heal and find something real, something true. In the weeks that followed, I kept to myself, slowly adjusting to life on my own. The house, my routine, everything felt strange and empty. Friends reached out, checking on me, offering support, but I wasn't ready to talk about it much. I'd gone through something I never imagined, and I needed time to put the pieces of myself back together. Mike was a huge help, giving me space when I needed it, but being there whenever I felt the urge to vent or just be around someone who understood. And as days turned to weeks, I began to feel a little lighter. It was like each day took a bit of the weight off my shoulders. Some days were hard, really hard, and the memories of what happened still lingered, but there was a shift, a faint light at the end of the tunnel. Reflecting on it all, I realized how much of myself I'd given to that relationship, maybe even parts I'd neglected. In losing it, painful as it was, I was finding myself again, rediscovering the person I'd become after years of being us. I started reconnecting with old hobbies, working out more, reading again, filling my time with things that reminded me of who I was outside of that relationship. To anyone who's been in a similar place, feeling that same devastation, I'd say this: give yourself time. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to feel broken, to take a step back from everything. But remember, it won't be like this forever. Little by little, you'll reclaim parts of yourself, and one day, you'll wake up and realize you're stronger than you ever thought possible. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know when I'll be ready to trust again. But for now, I'm learning to be okay on my own, and that's enough. Thank you for listening to me, and to everyone who supported me and wrote a comment under this video, thank you. It helped me through more than you'll ever know.